Are we witnessing the end of the mighty U.S. dollar's era as the ultimate symbol of economic power?
Could the U.S. dollar soon lose its power, and how would that impact the U.S. on the world stage?
The dollar hegemony, which has dominated the international monetary system for decades, is now facing an unprecedented challenge. Major players around the globe are breaking away from the greenback and charting their own course towards financial independence. In this video, we'll uncover the extent to which the U.S. dollar is at risk and the potential impact of the de-dollarization movement on the U.S. economy. But what is de-dollarization exactly? It's a game-changing movement that seeks to reduce the U.S. dollar's dominance in global markets, which economists are considering as a serious and inevitable threat to the U.S. economy. Since the Bretton Woods Agreement made the U.S. dollar the official reserve currency of the world in 1944, it has been hailed as the king of currencies. This has given the U.S. immense power and influence over other economies, and it has used it to achieve foreign policy goals, mainly by imposing economic sanctions. However, some countries are not exactly thrilled about playing by U.S. rules anymore. They want to challenge the dollar hegemony and take control over their own currencies and economies. BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are the main players in the de-dollarization movement through the creation of a new currency that won't depend on the U.S. dollar. These countries are becoming an unstoppable force that cannot be ignored in the world economy, as BRICS nations already transact around $150 billion every year without involving the U.S. After all, these nations cover more than 25% of the world's territory, account for 40% of the world's population, and hold a combined GDP of $20 trillion, nearly matching the United States' total GDP of $25 trillion. But the BRICS nations have been up to more than just creating a new currency to take down the U.S.'s stronghold on global markets. Since 2010, China has been ditching the U.S. dollar. But a few weeks ago, the country just made a massive step toward establishing more trade deals in its own currency, completing its first-ever trade of liquefied natural gas settled in yuan. This move has enormous implications since the energy sector is one of the biggest components of foreign trade. Also, Brazil and China have agreed to trade in their own currencies, and Saudi Arabia has expressed a willingness to trade in the Chinese yuan. Moreover, India is now trading with 18 different countries using the Indian rupee instead of the U.S. dollar, while Russia has been using the yuan to trade in the global markets since facing economic sanctions imposed over its war in Ukraine. Even the French and Brazilian presidents, Emmanuel Macron and Inácio Lula da Silva, are calling for Europe and developing countries to reduce its dependence on the U.S. dollar, a massive hit for the United States, especially considering that both countries are Western nations. And as the United States keeps implementing its economic policies and carrying out large-scale government spending, several countries, including Argentina, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, and Indonesia, among others, are contemplating joining the BRICS movement and abandoning the U.S. dollar. If this happens, the BRICS nations, along with these countries, would represent over 50% of the world's population and control nearly 60% of all global gas reserves and strategic development, considering that the BRICS currency aims to be backed by gas, gold, and other rare earth elements. And with all of these groundbreaking developments come inevitable concerns, especially given the U.S. dollar's market share decline over the past 2 decades. According to the International Monetary Fund, the U.S. dollar has lost a staggering 12 percentage points of market share over the last 20 years, dropping from 71% to 59%. With so much at stake, the pressure is on the U.S., and if the dominance of the U.S. dollar is lost, it could be catastrophic for America and its citizens. Picture this: waking up to the news that the dollar in your wallet, once a symbol of prosperity, is now worthless. It may seem like a nightmare, but the BRICS nations are determined to make it a reality. For decades, the U.S. dollar has been the backbone of global markets, but recent events have put its status under threat like never before. If the BRICS nations' plan succeeds, the consequences could be devastating for Americans. For instance, hyperinflation could take hold, causing cost of living to skyrocket, reducing the quality of life for most Americans, and making it difficult for families to afford even the most basic necessities, such as food, housing, clothing, and healthcare. But the consequences of such an economic downturn could go beyond individual finances. The U.S. government relies on the dollar's status as a reserve currency to issue treasury bonds and borrow money at low interest rates. Losing this status could result in higher interest rates for the U.S. and increased national debt, which could directly impact middle-class Americans through higher taxes or reduced spending on social programs. These events could be compounded by countries holding significant amounts of U.S. debt, potentially dumping treasury bonds, causing an economic crisis like never before. Moreover, the loss of the U.S. dollar reserve currency status could have geopolitical implications, causing the United States to lose significant global influence and power. This, in turn, could lead to changes in foreign policy decisions and a shift in global power dynamics. Now, while it is true that the BRICS movement and recent events have sparked discussions about the potential of a new world currency that could challenge the dominance of the US dollar in the global economy, it's not going to be an easy task to replace the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. The US dollar has held this position for almost 80 years, and for good reason. Its perks are practically unlimited, from lower interest rates to the ability to fund budget deficits indefinitely. For instance, let's take a closer look at China's yuan. Despite being the world's second largest economy, less than 3% of global foreign exchange reserves are in Chinese yuan, a tiny fraction compared to the US dollar reserves. The US market is simply unmatched in its depth and liquidity, with the US Treasury market alone worth a staggering $42 trillion. More than the size of Russian and China's bond markets combined. But what makes the US dollar so powerful? It's called the network effect. The idea that the value of a currency is determined by how much people are willing to accept it as a payment, and the US dollar is like the popular kid in school who everyone wants to hang out with. It's the currency of choice for trade invoicing, with over 70% of exports outside of Europe priced in dollars. Also, in terms of global currency trading, the US dollar currently makes up 90% of all transactions. The US dollar network effect makes it extremely challenging for other currencies to catch up and become as widely used as the US dollar. Take China and other BRICS nations for example. If they want to challenge the dominance of the US dollar, they will have to deal with limitations of their own currencies, such as restrictions on how much such currencies can be used for international transactions and a lack of viable investment options for other countries. So, while a new currency driven by the BRICS alliance may be on the horizon, and nations around the world are making efforts to ditch the US dollar, it's not going to be an easy task to take its place in the global market. The US dollar is a currency that has proven itself time and time again. It continues to be the currency of choice for trade invoicing, with a solid network effect that has been built up over decades. And its depth and stability is still unmatched in the global financial arena, as many countries around the globe hold significant amounts of US Treasury securities and banknotes. It is true that nothing lasts forever, but the US dollar's resilience is something to take comfort in. Its position as the world's reserve currency is not likely to change in the near future, as there is simply no practical alternative to the US dollar right now. However, the future of the US dollar remains intriguing, and we must keep an eye on the developments in the global financial arena. As history has shown us, things can change in the blink of an eye, and we must be prepared for any eventualities.